Lamb growth rates are really vital to the profitability of any sheep flock. Slow growing lambs are inefficient. They're more likely to be kept on farm for longer, which means that they're taking up resources from other animals on the farm. They're more likely to die the longer they're on farm, and the profit margins are sensitive to fluctuating lamb price. So the quicker lambs grow, the quicker they can be sold off farm, which frees up resources for the rest of the flock, which will then go on to potentially improve the number of lambs produced in the following year. Monitoring lamb growth rates within the season is really useful to understand whether different management practices are potentially influencing their performance. So it can be used alongside observations in terms of the weather, but also in terms of the worming protocols and in terms of the grass and nutrition that's provided. So it gives a bit of an indication as to whether your management is adequate for the flock. It's also beneficial to identify the best performing genetics in the flock to enable you to continue to keep these fast growing genetics for good production in the next years. So faster growing lambs that meet other farm criteria should be those selected for your replacement ewe lambs and ram lambs to keep those good growth genetics in the flock. And then finally, monitoring lamb growth rates is good to understand the flock efficiency. So as an industry target, we suggest that lowland sheep producers should target 250 grams per day in lamb growth rates from birth to slaughter. So by monitoring the growth rates in your flock, you can understand how you compare with this benchmark, but also over time you can produce an understanding of what's possible on your farm and develop targets more suitable to your farm. All in all, it helps you understand whether improvements can be made to genetics, to nutrition, to your health management in order to improve this important element of flock production. So there are various approaches to monitoring lamb growth. The full sort of belt and braces approach of weighing every lamb on a regular basis works well if you've got the good setup, and that's great to understand and improve the genetics over time because you can understand the individual growth rate of each lamb. However, I do understand that not all flocks will be set up to do this in terms of labour, in terms of equipment. So there are more what I call pragmatic approaches to monitoring lamb growth rates that other farms might opt in to do. At a very basic level, looking at the kill sheet data or the information from store lambs sales, so the sales data, you can actually back calculate what the lamb performance must be each year and use that to understand whether you're going in the right direction. For those selling slaughter, this may require a bit of an assumption in terms of what their kill-out percentage must be in the region of 42 to 48%. But as long as you do the similar approach each year, you can keep track and make sure that you're going in the right direction. In addition to this, you might want to have an estimate of what the lamb birth weights must have been. And these often range from about 4 to 5 kilos. You can again put in a similar assumption, say 4.5 kilos or 5 kilos for more sort of continental breeds as a way of back calculating, or you can weigh a few lambs, a sample of lambs at lambing time to understand what the average weight is for your flock. Now that's good retrospectively, but it doesn't help you if you want to understand different management approaches you can be taking within the season, how you might change and adapt according to the lambs are growing. And again, if you don't want to weigh every single lamb, another approach might be is to weigh a sample of the lambs. Say if you've got a group in for dozing, you might decide to weigh a sample of 50 or 80 or so lambs just to gauge the performance of the flock and enable you to understand what they're doing. And in order to do this, we have a bit of an understanding that a fairly uniform flock, capturing 56 lambs of that flock is sufficient. And in this approach, you might deduct the heaviest 3 and the lightest 3 and take an average of the 50. And as long as you do it consistently, that gives a gauge, that gives you this bit of information in a relatively easy way to do it. If there is, say, a spread of weights more than 10 kilos from the lightest to the heaviest, for instance, so a less uniform group of lambs, you might capture 86 in that group. And again, just taking an average of 80, so deducting the heaviest 3 and the lightest 3, taking an average of the 80 just to give you this bit of information. What is key to this sort of approach, so weighing a sample, is just making sure that it's a random sample. So just coming up with a protocol to make sure that you're not just selecting the heaviest lambs in the group. So maybe if you come bringing them through the race, weighing every 5th lamb that comes through the race, or you know, just any approach to make sure it's random. And what is key to all of this is making sure that you're consistent. Gut fill can have a big impact on growth rate assumptions, and it's quite difficult to be completely consistent with that, but just making sure it's like a similar time that they are in the yard for each time you weigh them. And I guess the easiest approach to that is just weighing them as soon as they come off grass, or within a short amount of time off grass. So we've heard from Owen here at Sockland Farm with his vlog series, how the lamb growth rates are trending in the right direction. In 2024, they have averaged at 250 grams a day, which is great, and an improvement on previous years. For those that are seeing growth rates that are suboptimal, that are not quite at that target, I would suggest looking at your grass, making sure that they are getting sufficient grass in front of the lambs. Ideally for lambs at grass, I would say they shouldn't be grazing any less than 5 centimetres, because that will impact their growth rates. I would say looking at the clover proportion in the forage that they're getting. Clover is very influential to their growth rates. And then on top of that, if the nutrition's looking good, then it would be a case of looking at their worm burdens as well. So doing fecal egg counts, monitoring their back ends alongside their growth rates can help understand whether worm burdens are impacting their performance. And then finally, if you're happy with the feed in front of them, the grass, if you're happy with the worms, then it'd be a case of looking at trace elements, doing blood testing to understand whether trace elements such as cobalt, which is the normal trace element that impacts wean lamb growth rates, that might be coming into play as well. I would encourage you to take any approach to just have a gauge of what lamb performance is like on your farm, just to understand where improvements can be made in the future.